All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. We're looking at the incredibly intense standoff between the US and Iran as of May 2026. Right now, the situation is a powder keg. We've got Donald Trump further ratcheting up tensions with renewed war threats, while totally stalled peace talks are actively undermining a very, very fragile ceasefire. Seriously, the sources paint a picture of a region completely on edge, with literal guns on Iranian television and streets, and global consequences hanging in the balance.
To understand the sheer gravity of this moment, listen to this. The U.S. president is explicitly threatening annihilation if a peace deal isn't reached quickly, setting an incredibly high-stakes tone. He posted this message on his Truth social platform right after meeting with top national security officials about next steps, which actually include resuming military action. So it's a stark, blunt ultimatum delivered to a nation that is already deeply scarred by recent strikes.
Now, to grasp the sheer surreal reality on the ground in Iran right now, get this. On the state-run OFOG channel, a male anchor named Hossein Hosseini literally fired an assault rifle directly into the studio ceiling on live television. This happened right after he got an on-air lesson from a masked member of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's wild, but it's also a highly coordinated broadcast of defiance, intentionally designed to harden the resolve of their domestic audience.
Section 1. Guns on the Streets, the Surreal Reality in Tehran.
So out on the streets, the authorities are actively preparing the public for conflict, and the scenes are just startling. We're talking public gun kiosks set up right in places like Van Eyck Square, offering basic weapons training. Reporters are seeing women being taught how to strip and assemble AK-47s, and even small children practicing with unloaded Kalashnikovs. And all of this is happening against a backdrop of nightly, state-sponsored rallies designed to mobilize supporters. The militarization of everyday public life is intense.
But you know, this really highlights a stark, deeply polarized divide within Iran itself. It's almost like two different worlds. On one hand, you have rally-goers shouting over deafening chants, totally dismissing U.S. threats and declaring they are ready to fight. But then, just around the corner in tranquil parks, you have university professors whispering to reporters in English, absolutely terrified for their children's futures and desperately hoping to avoid being dragged back into a devastating war. It's a country caught between martial fervor and deep exhaustion. Section 2. The ticking clock. Stalled diplomacy and expanding goals. So how do we get to this bizarre limbo? Let's trace it back. A conflict that exploded on February 28th with major U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iran has now ground to a tense halt. After weeks of heavy fighting, a fragile 2-week ceasefire, which was actually brokered by Pakistan, took effect on April 8th. But as we sit here in mid-May, those peace negotiations have hit a brick wall. We're in this weird space where the shooting is mostly paused, but true peace is nowhere in sight.
Adding a massive amount of friction to this diplomacy, the U.S. has laid out these incredibly expansive goals. We're not just talking about a simple ceasefire here. The U.S. administration wants to end Iran's nuclear program, degrade their missile capabilities, stop support for proxy forces, and, get this, achieve regime change. They want to fundamentally alter Iran's military and political landscape. This massive checklist makes finding any sort of quick mutual resolution almost impossible, especially since Iran views these demands as an existential threat.
Section 3. A Fragile Ceasefire, Visualizing the Deadlock.
When you put the U.S. and Iranian demands side by side, you instantly see why a comprehensive agreement feels impossible. They are absolute polar opposites. The U.S. is demanding the surrender of 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium and strict limits on nuclear facilities, with absolutely no compensation for wartime damages. Meanwhile, Iran is demanding the exact opposite: an end to all regional military operations, a full lifting of sanctions, the release of their frozen assets, and compensation for war damages. There is virtually no common ground. But the psychological aspect of this deadlock is fascinating. Neither side wants to blink first or look weak. It turns these negotiations into a zero-sum game where compromise literally feels like surrender. Analysts are noting that Washington wants any agreement to look like Iran is caving to pressure, while Tehran demands terms that recognize its strength and sovereignty. So when both sides desperately need a narrative of victory, actual meaningful diplomacy is just paralyzed. Section 4. The global choke point. The macro consequences. Let's step back for a second and look at the macro picture, because this is huge. A massive 20%, 1/5 of all global oil exports, passes right through the Straits of Hormuz. This isn't just an isolated regional dispute. It's centered squarely on top of one of the world's most vital energy transit routes. When diplomacy breaks down here, the entire world's economy feels the shockwave. And right now, both militaries are actively strangling that vital artery.
The situation has devolved into a dual blockade. You have the U.S. Navy actively blocking Iranian ports to cut off their trade, and in direct retaliation, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is asserting control over the strait, demanding tolls, and restricting commercial shipping. It is a high-stakes maritime chokehold.
And the ripple effects, they're already causing global chaos. We are seeing oil prices spike to $111 a barrel. A drone strike recently hit an electrical generator at the UAE's Baraka nuclear plant, which is the only operational one in the Arab world. Plus, in Lebanon, despite a nominal truce, Israeli forces conducted massive bombing campaigns targeting proxy leaders. Basically, the longer the US and Iran stall, the more the surrounding region goes up in flames.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to ponder. What actually happens to the global economy and the Middle East when this fragile ceasefire finally reaches its breaking point? The clock is ticking. Both sides are armed to the teeth, both are digging their heels in, and the consequences of failure are absolutely massive. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack these sources. Keep learning, stay curious, and keep your eyes on how this critical situation unfolds.